What is going on, everybody? Happy Saturday night. Hope you're doing well. I got a very special guest, Ryan Garcia from Fireside Yankees, in the house. Ryan, thanks for coming on tonight. And I really like having Ryan on because the knowledge that he brings and the insight that he brings is very refreshing. And he knows his stuff. And that's why I like to bring people on here that we can help elevate the content on the channels. So if you're not subscribed, you're not supporting Ryan's channel, please support Fireside Yankees. So Ryan, thanks so much for coming on, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, man. There's a lot of interesting stuff that I feel like has transpired over the last week in terms of rumors and, just different news with free agency. So there's a lot to get into. I'm really excited, man.
We have a lot to talk about. I mean, we're going to talk about Juan Soto, obviously, and talk about, how to build a team without him, how to build a team with him, because it's a little bit different. But the news of the day is Roki Sasaki. So why don't we start there, Ryan? What's your thoughts about what's going on with Roki today?
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things that really stand out to me about Roki Sasaki is that this entire process is unprecedented. We rarely see a guy like Roki Sasaki kind of put together a verbal agreement and then kind of force himself out of his contract to get himself to the major leagues. I know that the Dodgers are the prohibitive favorites, but I think there are a lot of examples throughout MPB history of guys getting posted, and the team that's the prohibitive favorite does not end up with him. I mean, I remember last offseason, it was the Yankees were the favorites at one point for Yamamoto. It turned out the entire time the Dodgers were the team he always wanted to go to. Even with guys like Masataka Yoshida, Seiya Suzuki, even Shohei Ohtani. I mean, a lot of these guys don't end up where you expect them to. The Mariners were the team that were supposed to get Ohtani. I remember with Seiya Suzuki, the Red Sox and the Mariners are both heavily involved there. He ends up with the Cubs. Even Shota Managa, I remember like a couple days before he signed, it was he's going to be a San Francisco Giant, and then he ends up with the Cubs. So, it's going to be really interesting to follow Sasaki's process, and it feels like there's not a lot known about his preferences. Like there are some inklings that he wants the Dodgers, and there's some reports that he wants a small market team. So, I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know where he's going to go. It feels like it's very confusing to figure that out.
Yeah, and I wouldn't just hand him to the Dodgers just yet. And to me, he's got a different skill set than Yamamoto. Yamamoto's got a track record, years and years and years of longer innings and so on and so forth. Well, Roki Sasaki throws harder. His stuff is different, but he's only thrown more than 100 innings twice. So he reminds me more of like somebody like Michael King, that you can transition from a reliever, a long reliever, into a starter over time. And the fact of the matter is somebody's going to get him for 6 years on the cheap, and it's a good amount of time to let him develop and let him grow and transition into a starter. So that's what you want him to be over time. You can do that, but you can still get the benefit of him in short relief and let him acclimate to the majors, potentially without injuries, because he's had shoulder injuries before as well. So that's got to be factored in too. So, I mean, do you have any feeling on that? And what's your take on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of variables, too, that go beyond just the innings count. In Japan, they pitch every 6 days. Over here, it would be, it's a 5-man rotation. I don't think the Yankees are going to push to a 6-man if they had gotten someone like Roki Sasaki. So your idea of like, hey, can he start out as maybe a reliever, build up from there? I don't think that's out of the cards. I don't think that's like out of the cards either. I know that the idea of him being a starter is enticing, but as you mentioned, he is not the polished, kind of proven, multiple-time Cy Young winner that Yoshinobu Yamamoto was in Japan. He, quite honestly, he is an unfinished product, right? It feels like there should be more in the tank. His fastball velocity regressed this year compared to last year from about 99 miles per hour to 97 miles per hour. And he also lost some vertical movement on his fastball. And a big difference between the MPB and the major leagues isn't just the quality of hitter you face, it's the baseball itself. It's harder to get vertical movement on those major league balls. So when you're already seeing a decline in vertical movement, when we know this guy has a storied injury history, and then you factor in throwing a baseball that's harder to get vertical ride on, he's going to have an adjustment period. And perhaps, as you mentioned, it would be better for that adjustment period to occur as a reliever versus as a starter.
And if you look at his size, he's about 6'5", he's about 170 pounds. So there's time for him to fill out of it into his body. So if he puts on more weight and develops over time, it would be better for him long-term as a starter, which is why I think it's a better idea to start him as a reliever and transition him over these next couple of years into a starter, where if that's where you want him, I would definitely be diligent about how I would transition him here. Because you're right, too. You're facing better players as a whole, okay, heavier baseball. It's a whole different game here. It really, really is. But kudos to his team, Chief Line Marines, for posting him early. He said he wanted to do this, and this is the second time he's asked him. He's shown that he wants to be one of the best, which is one reason why, in the back of my mind, I don't really see him, because he'd probably be third fiddle in the Dodgers. Whereas if he comes to a team in a small market, or even the Yankees, he'd probably be the number one guy. So
Yeah,
that's a
great
little bit
point.
of a story, right?
So I also think, when it comes to, where he wants to be, I mean, he's not going to get a lot of money from the initial contract he signs. This is essentially a minor league contract. The first 3 years of his deal will be pre-arbitration. He'll count for like $700,000 towards luxury tax. I know there's a CBA agreement they have to come to in between that 3-year run. So his minimum salary could go up a little bit because the minimum salary for players usually goes up after CBA agreement. But the big thing is, advertisements, right? There is a little bit of some like, all right, how is he going to be more nationally recognized if money's part of this? If money's not part of this, as you mentioned, small market team, somewhere he can kind of build his own thing. Shohei Ohtani, when he came over, was a phenom prospect. This was not some random guy who came up from Japan. He was one of the most hyped up prospects to ever come out of Japan. And he went to the Angels, right? Like he signed with the Angels. He said no to the Yankees. He said no to even the Mariners. He said, I want to be a Los Angeles Angel. He willingly chose that. I mean, I wouldn't put it out of the picture for him to, turn around and sign with a team that we don't really expect. Maybe it's the Mariners. Maybe it's the Angels. But, as you mentioned, we don't really know. And I think that's the important thing. There's a lot of like, he's 100% going here or there. We don't really know yet.
He could come out of nowhere and say, I want to play for Terry Francona and the Reds, for all we know. We have no idea. But the other thing I wanted to point out is, at least when it comes to the Yankees, I don't think they're going to sign guys that are attached to qualifying offers until Roki is done, and even Murakami, who's likely to get posted because he's already hired Casey Close, the agent, and so on and so on. But it hasn't happened yet. But anytime you sign somebody attached to a qualifying offer, you not only give up 2 draft picks, but you give up $1 million in international signing money as well. They need as much as they can for a guy like Roki and as much as they can for Murakami, which is why I see them passing right now on Christian Walker, Alex Bregman, and Pete Alonso, guys that are talked about a lot in the Yankees universe, because they have to save that money for guys like Roki and Murakami. Do you have any take on that, Ryan? Do you agree with that?
So I think I've grown a little less like fond of Murakami's game just because the strikeout rates, they went up randomly and they haven't come back down. And that's in a league where the fastball velocity is a lot lower. You kind of get concerned about that kind of swing. We're talking about a league where the average fastball velocity is almost reaching 95. But when it comes to Saki, I mean, there's absolutely a question of like, all right, how does this affect their ability to sign guys at QOs? How about guys because this is for the 2025 signing period as well. How about guys that they have like kind of verbal agreements with? Are they going to start pulling out of some of these verbal agreements? There's no one like a Jason Dominguez out there that they have a verbal agreement to, but like there's still players that they've been probably telling for 2-3 years now, hey, when you're 16, this is what you're going to get. Let's just see how it kind of progresses. And the other thing I think is important here when it comes to anyone with a QO, as I mentioned, the draft picks, the Yankees have traded from their farm system heavily over the last 3 years. I think one of the things that we're starting to see now is the lack of upper level starting pitching depth at the minor league level. They have guys who can develop into that role potentially, but by trading Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, Drew Thorpe, by trading, Richard Fitz, you've depleted that part of your organization. So they're trying to rebuild that back up. We saw that by them drafting a bunch of pitchers in the most recent draft. So I do wonder if they're a little more cautious about selecting someone with a qualifying offer and signing them for agency. And honestly, I think they're not going to one that requires, more than a 2-year agreement until the Soto situation's figured out too, as well. Because like, you don't want to commit 7-8 years to Bregman before Soto's even made a decision. Has Hal Steinbrenner showed that he's going to sign, Alex Bregman and Juan Soto at the same time, especially with the payroll, like starting out with arbitration numbers at like 244, you're already right up there with the first threshold. I expect a little more caution if they sign Soto outside in the moves they make after.
Yeah. And to your point too, I mean, I hope that they don't, because they've done this a lot recently, is waiting for their top target and letting everybody else that they need to fill holes with be signed elsewhere. So Soto does not address the bullpen. He does not address the infield. They still have holes that they need to address. So I hope, and I don't work for them, I can't speak for them, but I hope that they have whatever amount of money allocated, whatever, even if it's no holds barred, that they still are willing to address bullpen and infield, because those holes are still there, whether Soto comes or not, right? So, and I'd hate for those guys to be signed elsewhere, and then when the Yankees get a decision on Soto, they have nothing else to fill their holes with. Because I want Soto to come back to a better team, not the other way around. I think that's a better way to entice him and Scott Boras to coming back here, right? He's coming back to a better team. Yeah, Cole is great. Soto's great, but that is not enough. You can see they got to the World Series, but they need more, right, to beat a team like the Dodgers. So I'm hoping that they take this mentality with that. And to your point, too, about the numbers, I mean, there are non-tender candidates that they can move on from. There are some guys, like Marcus Stroman. Apparently, he's going to be shopped at the winter meetings. So if they move on from a Stroman, they'll probably have to attach a good prospect to him. But if you want to move him to clear up money to address other holes, you can do that, right? Especially if you want to if you have somehow can bring in Roki Sasaki, it makes it easier to move somebody like Cortez or Stroman. It makes it more easier to bear on the stomach. But that said, I mean, this stuff, it's got to be very strategic this offseason when it comes to Roki, and then when it comes to Juan Soto, which we'll talk about in a few minutes too. So how would you go about this if you had the power? How would you go about this?
So, Juan Soto, I agree. Like you want to know how much money you're going to have to sign players after Soto, whether it is because you signed him or, he went elsewhere. The first thing I think that stands out to me is that they need to be aggressive with their bidding, and they need to try to get this thing done. I think the Mets are going to deploy a similar strategy, because if you're the New York Mets, you also don't want to be asking yourself, so are we spending $700 million or are we not, right? Like when they're trying to make other agreements, they have interest in Willy Adames. They seem to be interested in trying to trade for someone like Garrett Crochet. You want to have your situation in order before you go out and spend $700 million, or you want to have it in order while you're trying to make that decision. The Yankees, I think one of the markets that they can tackle early is the bullpen market, the reliever market, because none of those guys are going to get hung up over Juan Soto. And the Yankees, I don't view them as a team that's going to hand out an $18 million a year deal to a reliever anyways, regardless of whether they sign Soto or not. The one guy I look at and I'm enamored with him is Jeff Hoffman. He was with the Philadelphia Phillies. He struck out 33.6% of batters faced with a 2.17 ERA. And look, the Yankee bullpen, they need bat missers. They need guys with high-level stuff who can punch tickets and get big timeouts. I also like the idea of having someone who has some familiarity and some comfort closing, but has also spent a lot of their careers as a middle reliever, because when you look at Luke Weaver, right, you don't want him anchored down to the ninth inning. I like that Luke Weaver can be a multi-inning guy. You want to have situations where, Luke Weaver is able to come into the seventh inning, get the seventh and eighth inning, and then you hand it to a guy like Hoffman for the ninth inning, or you go to Hoffman in, let's say the seventh or eighth inning, and then you go to Weaver in the ninth inning. I think having that kind of flexibility is important. And then the other thing is some teams actually view Hoffman as a potential starting candidate. I wonder if the Yankees are able to push Hoffman into being maybe a multi-inning guy, kind of like Weaver is, and having two guys where you might be able to get 4 innings out of them to close out a game. And in a playoff situation, that can win you ball games. I feel like game 1s and game 5, they really hurt me, because if you kind of feel like if Weaver could have gotten that to start that eighth inning instead of being pigeonholed to the ninth, if Weaver could have came in earlier in game 5, maybe they win both those games. Maybe they're up 3-2 in the series. I feel like that World Series loss, not that it's this reflection of like them being bad or whatever, but it should serve as, if we just are a little bit better, we win the World Series. We just got to get, you know what I mean?
And that right there is the difference between using 3 or 4 pitchers in a game and using 7 and 8, right? Because if you have a multiple games in a row, you have to preserve your arms for the other games, right? And this is where a guy like Hoffman or Sasaki comes into play, or Weaver. But I don't want to use Weaver for 2 innings every single day. I want someone else who can shoulder that burden with him, right? And it's where like Michael King was such a magical piece here, which is where we need another Michael King type. And this is one reason I would deploy Roki Sasaki if he came here in a strategic way to fulfill that role, because it would be a perfect fit here as a power guy. But Jeff Hoffman is a guy like Tanner Scott I would love, but I think he's going to cost a lot of money. And other guys, even older guys, like if strikeouts are a priority, look at Kirby Yates' numbers. Look at David Robertson's numbers. David Robertson struck out 99 guys in 7 innings this year. Even though he's 40, he still has pristine ERA and pristine control. Okay, career 2.90 ERA, and he was 303 flat this year. So you could probably get him on a 1-year deal, as is Kirby Yates as well. He had a 1.17 ERA this year, and they were both in the American League. So they're already familiar with the league. So these guys like that, you could probably get. I'm confident in their ability to find another Tim Hill. I like Tim Hill. They could probably get another Tim Hill 10 years younger, right, for just the same value. So I'm confident in their ability to fill the bullpen out. But I do think, maybe 2 power type arms like a Hoffman or someone like that would be a good idea for the bullpen. So But as it pertains, let's move over to Juan Soto now. Like, Juan Soto, this is an interesting one to me. Obviously, he's priority number one for the Yankees, right? We know this. He's priority number one for probably the Mets, probably a couple teams. I think the Dodgers are probably going to use him to drive up the price for the Yankees and the Mets. Why would they not? So, but if he stays versus if he goes, let's just say if he stays first, how would you build the rest of the team around him if he stays? And would he play right field if he stays in the near future at least?
At least in the near future, yes. I think they would just keep Judge in center and put Soto in right. I think left field has proven to be the more difficult position in the outfield compared to center field even. And, you can look even historically, right? When the Yankees acquired Curtis Granderson a decade ago, it was not Brett Gardner who stayed in center field. It was Curtis Granderson, the lesser defender, who played center while Gardner moved to left. And Gardner was a remarkable defensive center fielder early on in his career. So I think that's one of the indications. The fact that Judge has never been asked to seriously play left field is another indication of that. Why wouldn't Aaron Judge want to play left field? It probably because it's extremely difficult and physically demanding, and you want him to not get hurt playing that position. So I think Soto will stay in right. You just got to have to eat the fact that the outfield defense is going to be kind of suspect with Dominguez, Judge, and Soto. I'm willing to live with that because I think Juan Soto last year displayed that he is an even better hitter than we thought he was. He improved his ability to do damage on contact while striking out less. I find that phenomenal, right? A guy hits the ball harder and strikes out less. I think that's remarkable. That's the kind of stuff that's what makes him a generational talent, right? That's what makes him. He barreled 19% of batted balls. That's like Aaron Judge level, Giancarlo Stanton level, and he struck out 16.7% of the time. That's ridiculous. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say to your point too, like with him back, I think to me, in my opinion, cutoff realignment is important, meaning the Yankees have given up a lot of runs because of cutoff situations, relaying the ball from the outfield to the infield to home plate. So if I'm bringing him back for right field, I want Jazz at second because Jazz has a strong arm. If we don't have a super strong arm in the outfield, I want a strong arm in the infield to relay the ball to home plate faster, right? Which is why I would be more open to somebody like Ha-Seong Kim or something like that, the third base.
I love the idea of Ha-Seong Kim. He's an excellent defensive player, and on top of that, great plate skills. He could be a guy who I think benefits at the top of the lineup. Something I like about what Glaber kind of displayed last year is that if you're someone at the top of the lineup hitting in front of Soto and Judge, as long as you have good plate control, you're really going to have a great time hitting in that spot because it's a lot of just like, all right, see the pitch late and then just try to go from there. Glaber's entire approach has always kind of been very opposite field anyways. So he just tracked the ball late, was able to shoot the ball out to right field. And if it was a pitch off the plate, he just worked the walk, passed the baton, casually ran a 380 OBP. I love the idea of Ha-Seong Kim, man. He's an excellent defensive player. Also, very fast. If you add him to the infield with Jazz, Volpe, and you have Dominguez in there, you might see those four guys combined for 100 steals. The Yankees haven't had a team steal more than 104 bases since 2014. Those four guys alone to break that mark easily.
Yep. And I think he fits right in line with, if you're going to sign somebody like Soto, you have to be frugal with the rest of the budget. Yes. He's not going to break the bank for the team. And that, to me, it makes him a good fit for the Yankees. Not only where he would fit in the lineup, but where he would fit in the budget, right? And he runs the bases with reckless abandon. And it's just, we need guys like that, right? So that's – and first base, I mean, it makes it easier. If you have Ha-Seong Kim there third – you have Chisholm at second, Volpe at short. It makes it easier to kind of be, maybe be a little bit more bold or something like that. You can even trade for Vinny Pasquantino from the Royals or something like that for first base, right? And I think at that point, Soto decision is going to come after Roki or after Murakami. So at that point, you'll know whether you're willing to sign somebody attached to a QO or not, right? Yeah. Maybe then Christian Walker becomes a better option because he's probably the cheaper of between him and Pete Alonso. Plus, he's a Gold Glove, so maybe he becomes more of a fit then.
Yeah, I also would like to throw out if the Yankees needed to really cheap out at first base, like they didn't, maybe they splurged on the bullpen, or Ha-Seong Kim's market drove up a little bit, they had to pay a little more to get him, or Soto ends up signing for like $50 million a year. Someone like Carlos Santana appeals to me because two things. Number one, he hits lefties, so if he's not great next year, you start to see the age decline. He's more of like an average hitter. You can have him hit against lefties, and maybe Rice is capable of hitting against righties. But the bigger thing to me, and the thing that really kind of, if you kind of picture Ha-Seong Kim, Carlos Santana, Anthony Volpe, Jazz Chisholm, That is an elite, and I mean elite. That defensive infield alone will win you baseball games. And it counteracts, hey, my outfield defense isn't great, but you know what? My infield, and you also have to factor in the catcher, Austin Wells, they're going to throw guys out, advancing to second, because Wells really, I feel like, impressed with his ability to go throw guys out. Their pitching staff's going to get a lot of strikes stolen for them from the catcher from framing, and a lot of ground balls are not getting through that infield. That is an athletic infield. That is a great infield. And I did bring was that the catchers felt comfortable running those pick plays at first base that I felt were very successful. Someone like Carlos Santana is an excellent veteran. He brings both that kind of like good vibes. He's also kind of an enforcer. I don't know if you read that story in 2018. Yeah. He smashed a TV because his teammates were playing Fortnite in a dugout. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of how like Jorge Posada back in the day was an enforcer to complement the leadership of a guy like Jeter. Having someone who's a capable enforcer, who's a veteran in the infield, who's going to be able to guide kind of the traffic in the infield and be the captain of the infield. He could bring, and obviously the swing is built for the Bronx. I mean, he lifts everything in the air. He doesn't strike out a lot, works a lot of walks. That type of lineup, so when you start stacking them up, offensively, defensively, you don't really have to do much to make a good offense when you have Soto and Judge. You really don't. Like, I think last year proved, don't have to do much to do it. But by subtly improving your supporting cast around them, you just create this super deep lineup. They're either great defensively, can hit for power, or run the bases very well. The thing they need to avoid, bad hitters who are also slow. That's a terrible archetype. Cannot contribute offensively. Those guys are zeros in the playoffs, right? Think of kind of like the struggles when Verdugo struggled. If he got to first base, what was going to happen, right? Like, he wasn't stealing second. If Rizzo got to first base, LeMahieu got to first base. What was going to happen? They're not stealing second. They're zeros, right? You can't get anything out of them on the base pass, and he didn't hit them a lot last year. So, you want your poor hitters or your less talented hitters to be able to run the base as well, and the Yankees would have a lot of that. So I love that idea.
And with that speed at first, too, it's the difference between scoring on a double and staying at third on a double. That manufactures more runs for the Yankees, right? That's the difference between a 2-0 and a 3-0, 2-1 and a 3-1. Like that, it puts him in a position to score. And again, Jazz will be playing more of a natural position. He's a plus defender at second base. Kim will be third. It would improve. And one of our biggest weaknesses this year was infield defense. So we had problems. And this would structurally put it a mile ahead of where it was, but it also improve the bottom half of the lineup significantly, which is we need that too. So I like that. I like the way that aligns. Now, on the flip side, if Soto didn't come back, how do you recreate this man in the aggregate, right? Because that's like, who in the world has the impact that Soto has? Nobody individually. Nobody. So how in the world do you build around him? And the first thing that comes to my mind is Judge goes to right field. And I'm more willing to play Caleb Durbin at second base if that's the case. Because you have a strong arm in the infield, making it easy for Caleb Durbin to kind of develop and throw the ball and just be a natural second baseman. But then I would invest a little bit more heavily at first base, even with somebody like Carlos Santana. And I would invest more heavily, obviously, in trying to replace parts of Juan Soto's production. Like, how would you recreate him in the aggregate? I'll give you my take, but I want to get your take first.
So, full transparency, I think you'd be running clearly a worse team in 2025 than you did in 2024. I really do like, a lot of the options in the free agent market, but we got to be realistic here. It's going to be really hard to recreate him, and especially since once you start adding up, okay, you sign this player, that player, suddenly you got a group of players who are far more expensive than just Juan Soto. The first player who I would consider bringing in is Alex Bregman because of his defensive abilities and his bat. It's a little concerning to me, kind of like thinking about what his bat would be away from Houston, but you'd have to at least explore it. Maybe Willie Adames is a better fit, but he hasn't been a dominant hitter in his career, so I'm a little concerned about paying him the money that's being floated out there, like 7 years, $200 million, something like that. I know Anthony Santander is a popular name, but I don't know about you. I don't know how I feel about giving a guy who's not a great defender. I love home runs. I have never been shy about that. But he's not a great hitter. He's a pretty good one, if you get what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
It reminds me of Brady Anderson. Out of nowhere, he hit 50 home runs, and then he came back down to earth afterward. I have a feeling the same things that happened to Santander.
He's not a great defender. He's not a great base runner. It's kind of easy to imagine Anthony Santander being a pretty mediocre player in 2025. And he's a guy who might get $100 million. I'm good on that. And also, as you mentioned, it keeps Judge in center field. What is the point of Aaron Judge playing his second best defensive position and not his best one if you're not going to have Juan Soto on the team, right? Like, it defeats the purpose. So I would go out and get a great defensive center field, someone who can like just try to wow you. You know what I mean? Who's able to anchor the defensive side out there. I'd be more willing to invest in the infield, obviously, with first base and then the third base. And you want to maybe sign another starter. Maybe it allows you to trade one of your starters for a bat. Maybe a team like the Royals are willing to do, like a Clark Schmidt or a Luis Gil for Vinny Pasquantino, and then you just replace them with a starting pitcher you sign, and then you add an infielder. Suddenly you've got a really good team again. Not as good as last year's team, but a good team. It gets tough, right? Like it's tough. So, and if there is a starter I would sign, I'm very a big fan of Blake Snell because of how many bats he can miss. He strikes out a ton of guys, and he may only get about 5 years, may not be like 7, 8, 9-year guy where Corbin Burns might be.
Yeah.
Pound for pound, like game on the line, who am I taking in a game 7? I'll take Blake Snell over the other guys. That might be a controversial take, but he just strikes out so many guys. And how many times do you ask a starter to get 9 innings in game 7 in the year 2024, right? Like that never happens anymore. So not too concerned about him giving me like if he gives me 6 dominant, great. I've got 3 innings for my bullpen. You do that in the postseason anyways. I mean, the Yankees pulled Cole in the 6th and 5th inning so many times in the postseason. They don't let him get out of jams. It was, you look like you're...
Yep.
Don got into trouble, he was out of the game. Schmidt got into trouble, he was out of the game. You've got to be super aggressive with your bullpen usage anyway. So I'm fine with someone like Blake Snell, even if he's not pitching deep into games.
You know, it's crazy. Like I was looking at like how, the first thing I thought of Juan Soto is on-base percentage, right? Because on-base percentage is absurd. Him and Judge are 1 and 2 in baseball, right? So they're both over 400 significantly. And when I looked down the list, the only guy that represented anywhere near 400 was Jurickson Profar, who played the outfield, who was actually going to be a free agent. So he's a guy I would consider for the outfield. Now, I would probably move Jason Dominguez to center in this situation, keep Profar in left field. It just seems like the alignment makes more sense that way, right? But still bring up a good 4th outfielder at some point. And at that point, I might consider keeping Trent Grisham because of his elite glove and his ability to play multiple outfield positions, right? Otherwise, I would consider non-tendering him to clear payroll. But Profar is one guy I would consider, and Ketel Marte is another guy I would consider because he's also, I think, a year away from free agent. He has a 372 on-base percentage. These guys are solid contact guys. Their production is pretty decent. And Ketel Marte and Profar, they could both play multiple positions, so their versatility could come in handy for the Yankees. But aside from that, I agree with you. I think it would have to add a pitcher of significance as well as beefing up the bullpen because there's no way you can recreate Soto in the aggregate. It's impossible. It's impossible. This isn't Moneyball. Like, you can't do it. So, like, who in the hell would have the same impact that Soto would have for this team? Soto makes everybody better around him. And I don't know. And this, to me, would be probably the best way to do it. But I agree with you. I would invest heavily in probably 2 infield positions because I don't think it would be a good idea to bring up more than one player from the farm this year. Like Caleb Durbin's, Dominguez is already up here, and I'm okay with Dominguez. But Durbin and someone else would worry me. So Durbin is probably the only guy I would give a shot to if Judge was playing. If he won the job in spring training. If Judge is in right field, I'm more comfortable playing Durbin at second because of his ability to steal bases. He doesn't have a lot of swing and miss pitch, so he hits the ball a lot. So, and he runs the bases like Kim, and I would still maybe go after Kim for third base. But if Durbin is playing second, more likely Jazz Chisholm is playing third. So third is probably covered at that point. Right?
I agree with your point about rookies too. Like, you want to be careful with how many rookies you're relying upon because once you start racking up, all right, I'm relying on 3, 4, 5 rookies, you've got a very volatile team. You got a team that isn't very deep. You know what I mean? You've got rookies who are just handed jobs versus competing for them. It doesn't matter how they look in spring training. You have to play them, that kind of thing. That's not great. Like, you don't want to and that's not good for the rookie either, for their development. You want them to be, nourished into a role, not exactly just thrown into the fire. I think there are a lot of examples throughout Major League history of guys kind of benefiting a little more from like, all right, they've had to compete with somebody out of camp and then they got the job, that kind of thing versus, oh yeah, they just got the job because the team doesn't have another second baseman. Like that's some poor depth construction. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is what's going to tie up a lot of stuff right now. The Juan Soto decision, unfortunately, and he's a Scott Boras client. So he's going to follow the Scott Boras, platform right now. And he's already said openly, he's going to listen to all teams, which is fine, which is fair. But at the end of the day, he's only going to get maybe 3 offers that are going to be 600 or plus. And I think we know who the teams are probably going to be already. But he wants to hear everybody out, and that's fair. But at the same time, doesn't address all the other holes. And I think you're right. The Yankees would need to still address the bullpen, and maybe because they still have to address at least one infield position, maybe 2. So, and I guess they have to. It would be wise to decide where to play where to play Jazz, third or second, right? He's a plus defender at second, but he was pretty stellar at third base. I mean, in playing out of position for half season, I credit his effort, and he's got a ridiculously strong arm too. But in this particular situation, I'd give him a full year at third if Soto doesn't come back on and have Durbin at second if he wants the job. So, shout out to everybody in the chat, by the way. Anybody have any? So Durbin's built like a tank. I want to see if you have any questions. We got 70 likes. We got 200 plus people in here already. Let's get those like buttons up, gang. We appreciate it. And again, if you're not subscribed to Fireside Yankees, please do so. And again, let's see. Give an offer. Well, would you? Okay. Here's one from Michael Osmond. Would you give him an offer at a time? Would you attach a time limit to a Juan Soto offer?
I don't think I would give him a time limit. Like, I don't know if I'd be like, all right, you have until December 1st to accept this or else we're out. Obviously if it drags into like February, like you can't let that happen. You have to know. But again, the Yankees can kind of create their own time limit here by just being aggressive with their offers. I think the Yankees strategy around Soto should basically be something around, hey, I know you're going to get a ton of offers. There's a lot of teams that are interested. Go get your offers. Come back to us. We will match whatever offer you get from them. We will match it. Give us the last meeting. You give us the last meeting, we'll give you the top offer. We'll match the top offer. And if Soto really wants to be a Yankee, like if Soto genuinely prefers being a Yankee the way that some people have suggested, he'll come back and have that extra meeting, right? Like if that's the case, if he gets $650 million from the Mets, and that's that, and Scott Boras says, if you give us $650, he's yours, they'll do it, right? Like it's also important to note from like a business standpoint, how hard would it be to like market the New York Yankees and season tickets and all that stuff without Juan Soto, right? Without Juan Soto, that type of duo. And also when you have Juan Soto on your team, you're going to be competitive for the next decade plus.
Yep.
This team really does value being competitive and being in the mix every single year because, the Major League playoffs do kind of play into this randomness. I do get that. But at the same time, it's going to be so hard to build a contender without Juan Soto. It really is because you traded so much of your farm to get him. You traded Michael King to get him. Michael King has really blossomed into a frontline starting pitcher. You put a lot into that trade. You have to honor the investment. It's kind of crazy that, everyone talks about, well, Hal says he wants to cut payroll. He doesn't want a $300 million payroll. But even in those quotes, when they ask him, what about Juan Soto? Oh, we want Juan Soto. We want to keep Juan Soto. When Hal is very involved in negotiations, it's because he wants to get his guy. Look at Aaron Judge. Look at Garrett Cole. He wants his guy. I don't think this is I'm not saying this that Brian Cashman isn't like acquiring good players, but this is a Hal Steinbrenner and Brian Cashman led negotiation. This isn't just some Brian Cashman led negotiation. Hal wants his guy. I think they can get their guy.
And to your point too, I think the Yankees have an advantage. If Soto had never played for the Yankees, then I think the Mets would have a bigger advantage. But he played for the Yankees this year. I think that gives the Yankees an edge here. Okay, he knows what it feels like to play in the Bronx and play with this team. The fans love him. He loves playing here, which I think gives the Yankees a little bit more than a fighter's chance here, right? And they went to the World Series already with him. The next step would be winning the World Series. So I wouldn't rule the Yankees just out yet. I would not just hand them over to the Mets, even though some Mets fans are already wearing Soto jerseys. Let them. Go right ahead. Go right ahead. So that's fine. But going back to your point too, I'm still of the opinion that addressing other holes and giving him a better team to come back to will be a good idea for the Yankees to do that. If they beefed up their bullpen and beefed up this, beefed up that, I think it would be a good idea. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I do think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, your pitch needs to be sent around, hey, we're the New York Yankees. We're going to win if you're here. I mean, this is a franchise that does nothing but compete for titles. Every single year, we're in contention. Every single day that you wake up as a New York Yankee, you have a realistic chance to win a World Series. That's part of the pitch. People may not like hearing this because, well, they haven't won a World Series since this song. No one actually likes being a Yankee with all that nonsense that you hear. Every person who talks about playing for the Yankees talks about how it's a world-class organization to play for. People who come and play at Yankee Stadium talk about the road clubhouses are the best clubhouses they've ever been to. They get treated better on the road than they do at home. I mean, for all of the things that people like to nitpick on with the Yankee organization, players are treated very well here, and they can sell the idea that every single year that Juan Soto is a New York Yankee, every single day he wakes up in the uniform, he will be in contention for a World Series title. The Mets cannot sell that. I'm sorry. I don't care if they got to the NLCS. They cannot sell the consistency in contention that the Yankees can sell. Their GM has been there for 30 years. Their GM has never in his life had a losing season. The owner has been there for over a decade. Never in his life has he experienced a losing season. This is the New York Yankees. Like that's part of the pitch. And if they match any offer, they'll get their guy.
I thank you for saying that, because people think I'm crazy when I say that. They think I'm smoking dope. They think I'm nuts. I'm like, God, this is a real thing when it comes to the Yankees, right? I mean, like Aaron Boone or hate him, he's 10th all time in winning percentage. So he's continued this winning tradition with the Yankees, despite having only been to a World Series one time. Okay, 3 AL East titles, 2. They've had success here. Okay, so. And whether it's him or Girardi or Torrey, they've continued to win on a consistent basis. Every single year they haven't had a losing season in 30 plus years. That you can't really say that for any other. I can't think of any other team that can say that. They haven't had a losing season in over 30 years.
Absolutely,
that's huge. Now to your question, Abel, when is Roki? We don't know when he gets posted. We just know that he's going to get posted early. But when he does, he has 45 days to negotiate and agree to a deal with whoever team he's going to come to terms with. That's as soon as we know, if it's like November 17th or whatever, then that starts the 45 days. And then he has that period until then. And that's the way it is. And if he doesn't come to terms, then he has to go back to Japan for a year. So that's the process. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's pretty much the process. It's really not that complicated, but I do think now that he's here, he'll come to terms. And again, this is international free agency, so he's subject to a different spending restriction than he would Yamamoto, who waited until he was 25. He was eligible for a major league contract. That's why he got $300+ million. Roki Sasaki's not going to get that, but he knows that. Yeah, and he still wanted to come here. So kudos to him for that too.
All that's going to matter is who he wants to go to. Realistically, that's all that matters to him. There's probably a team or a few teams he's had in mind. We just don't know them. I think the Dodgers are one of them. I think the Padres are one of them. I think his connection with Yu Darvish is important to know. But we don't know who those other teams are. We don't know even where they're ranked. You know what I mean? That's also a big part of this.
Yeah, he could be good friends with Shota Minaga from the Cubs for all we know.
Hey, he could have grown up a Yankees fan. We don't know. We really don't.
We really have no idea. I mean, in terms of Murakami, I know the only team that he's mentioned has been the Yankees.
Yeah.
The Yankees are a West Coast team. That's pretty broad, but that's all we have to go on.
What if Roki Sasaki grew up an A's fan? What if he's just a diehard Athletics fan?
Yeah,
that'd be hilarious. That or the White Sox. It'd be so funny if he signed with the Chicago White Sox. Out of all could you imagine? It's like, are the Los Angeles Dodgers going to form a super team? Oh my gosh! And he signs with the literal worst team in the entire sport. That would be the funniest outcome. I almost kind of hope it happens.
You better not trade Garrett Crochet, because I want to be Garrett Crochet.
Yeah, I've always loved Garrett Crochet's game. That kind of thing.
That you never know. You really
never know.
That's why I think the speculation part of him just being going to the Dodgers, I think it's funny. That's not. Yeah. I'm not saying he's going to come to the Yankees. I think they have just as much a chance as anybody else does.
Yeah,
right. In terms
that's the best way to put it.
And the Yankees do have. They're over $6 million this year. Keep in mind too, they added $1 million when they traded Caleb Ferguson at deadline to the Astros. They added $500,000. They traded Billy McKinney. They added $500,000. So they added $1 million to the $5+ million they've already had. So they're over $6 million right now in international free agency money. So that's going to matter. There are teams above $7 million, but it's like the Reds, the Brewers, like teams that he's very likely not going to go to. But you never know. The Mariners have a huge Japanese connection, right? Huge Japanese market. The Yankees have a minority owner who's Japanese now too. So I know the Dodgers have Yamamoto and Ohtani, but I don't know how much of an edge that gives them. I really don't. So the Yankees could pull out, they could send Tanaka over there and Godzilla over there for all we know to try to bring him back. I have no idea. It's going to be fun watching and seeing. If we get him, we get him. If we don't, we don't. And that's the bottom line. But I think, to me, Soto's a bigger priority than Sasaki. And That's the way. I mean,
Absolutely,
yeah. And in terms of building out the rest of the team, without Soto, you're gonna have to go out a lot of positions. That's where you have to be aggressive.
You're going to have to pay a lot of players who are less of a certainty to be good than Juan Soto. That's the other thing. What are the odds that, I don't know. I mean, I talk about Blake Snell, and I love Blake Snell. What if he, with one bad pitch, his UCL is torn? That's a year and a half of him gone, right? A guy like Teoscar Hernandez, I think he's a great player. What if he just forgets how to hit sliders again? He's just a mediocre, a decent hitter with a bad glove in the outfield, right? Santander, same thing. Juan Soto, there's not a realistic world where Juan Soto isn't a top 10 to 15 player on the planet. There really isn't. You know what I mean? That's not going to happen. It could happen to any of these guys fall off. Any single one, any given day, any given year, one of these guys could completely suck next year. Soto, he's a guarantee to be one of the best players in baseball. That's why you pay him so much money.
Yep. And I personally, if you had to predict, I can't see him getting less than $600 million. I said it from the minute that Ohtani signed that $700 million deal, it gave Scott Boras the opening to ask for the same thing because he's 5 years younger. Okay, doesn't matter if he's two-way player. I don't think Ohtani is going to be two-way the next 10 years, and maybe the next 3 or 4, maybe. Okay, and then I think he'll transition to being a full-time hitter, which he's much better at hitting than he is pitching. Good pitcher, but he's a phenomenal hitter. So
it's also important to know, there's there are certain players who they get paid a little more because, again, of their marketability, what they do off the field for a franchise. So I think that's going to matter here too. And end of the day, I mean, Juan Soto's 5 years younger than Ohtani was, or 4 years younger than Ohtani was when he signed his deal. So, even if you take slightly higher AAV and you throw on 4 more years to it, you throw on 4 more years of like $44 million, that's $160 to $180 million right there, right? That you have to add on to the contract. So, personally, I think he's going to sign like I think he's going to get $700 million over 14 years. I think that will be, I think he'll get there.
I think he's got a good shot at being the first $50 million a year player.
Yep. That's kind of, I think he's got a real good in present day value, of course. It doesn't seem like Boras is too interested in the deferred money thing. I think that's unique to Ohtani because of the advertising. Ohtani can wake up and make $1 million off an ad. You know what I mean? Yeah. Soto can't really do that. I love Juan Soto. He just can't do that. You know what I mean?
Scott Boras is 70. Okay?
Yeah.
He's 70 years old. I don't think he's going to want to be here for 10 more years after.
Yeah, what's that? Yeah, what's that? What's that 2040 paycheck going to do for him? Nothing. He wants that money right now. He wants that more money ahora mismo.
I think it's important to factor that stuff in. And again, the Dodgers might be hamstrung the next year paying Ohtani $68 million a year to not play for them for 10 years. So he's making $2 million a year to play for them. Now they got to pay him $68 a year to not play for them. That's a wild thought. And I don't know what they're going to be like in a decade from now. That's would suck, and I know it's strategic and all that stuff, but that puts him in a bind. It's all benefit for Ohtani because if he retires, he'll go back to Japan. He's not going to be subject to federal taxes or state taxes. He won't be employed in the state of California, so he's going to save probably another $50 million just off of that alone. So it's kind of genius the way they set it up. They skirted the system. Oh well, but the Dodgers themselves are going to be hamstrung for like a decade. Financially, at least. So, I don't think the Yankees are going to want to do that. And I think it'll just be a straight whatever it is, 14-year, 15, whatever it might be, and maybe it'll have an opt out in there instead of a no trade clause. Maybe, but I don't know. Either way, he's gonna get paid one way or the other, right?
I also think part of this too, and when you talk about an opt-out, I wonder if maybe he's against it because familiarity and kind of continuity is something that Juan Soto has not had in his career, and it's something I think he does want in his career, right? Like he seemed to be kind of distraught about the idea of leaving the Nationals, and when he got traded, I think the numbers reflected that. He comes to New York, and this is like the first time that like, hey, this is a place where he could spend the rest of his career. Continuity is going to mean something to him here. I think that's partially not that is why they brought Boone back, but I think firing Boone right before you try to pitch to Juan Soto would have been insanity. Like, could you imagine? Like, so I don't even know who your manager is going to be, but we have familiarity. I don't know who your manager is going to be. The guy's gone, but and we're going to clear out the whole staff probably because the manager is going to pick his own staff. But like, there's familiarity here, like that. Come on, like, that wouldn't work.
I think that matters. He wants a place to call home. He wants a consistent. I get that. It makes sense. If you're going to spend over a decade there, you're going to want to have some kind of semblance of consistency. Like Judge is going to be, a bunch of years. Cole, whoever else they bring in, they're going to be. That consistency does matter.
Yeah, and it's not like, I don't know if a manager can make someone hit a cutoff man, right? Like, I don't know if that is how that works either, right? You know what I mean? Like, I have look, I don't always agree with Boone. I feel like that's the best way to put it, but the players like him, and they just went to the World Series. It'd be weird to fire him after that. You know what it'd be a lot like? If they fired him and then they brought in a new guy and that team didn't go to the World Series, everyone would complain. They fired Aaron Boone after he went to the World Series, and this guy went to the ALDS. Why they hired this? Just like with Girardi. I remember Girardi was very unpopular in 2017, and then all this time later, it's, why'd they fire Girardi? He went to Game 7 of the LCS. They haven't gotten back there since. Like, I don't think any fan is going to like their manager unless that manager wins them multiple World Series titles. I mean, Dodgers fans don't like Dave Roberts. He's won 2 rings. He's been to 4 World Series. I mean, he's won 4 pennants, 2 rings. I think he's one of the winningest managers ever already.
What the hell's wrong with him?
Yeah, as long as the players like the guy and that manager, that team wins under that manager, and they make decisions that you can explain, they're going to stick around, right? Like, I mean, the manager's impact on the game is not as high, in my opinion, as like the players, or, that's when you can get into maybe maybe it's management if you don't like roster construction, but like Aaron Boone can't sign guys. He can't be like, all right, I'm giving, I'm giving this guy 30 years, $50 million. I'm giving that guy, come on. Like, it's,
he's not the one that assembles the roster. He's not the one that sends his ups and his. He doesn't do any of that stuff. That's all above his head. He's got to deal with the roster that he's given.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes he can get overruled by Cashman. So people can call him a yes man all he wants, but if he gets overruled, he gets overruled.
And also, end of the day, you have to be able to explain your moves at times, right? Like there are certain risks, and you have to deal with people, right? You're not dealing with robots, dealing with people. You can't, those are real human beings in that dugout. You've got to keep morale, and you got to figure out how to work with different personalities and meld them together. Also, another thing I think that's really important, there's not a lot of stories of turmoil in the clubhouse that leak to the public, which I think is a good sign. You know what I mean? I'm sure there are things that players, disagreements, stuff like that, players have had, and not great moments. I mean, when this team was struggling in July, I think they were all happy, cheery at each other? Probably not, right? But that stuff doesn't leak. How often do you see, I mean, we saw, what was it, that Nationals player, CJ Abrams, in a casino in September, right? That doesn't happen here. I think that's a big part of it with Soto too. That kind of stuff, even with the Mets. I mean, the Jorge Lopez situation where he throws his glove and he ends up getting cut from the team right after. That type of stuff doesn't happen here. I think that's important to Soto, maybe. Yeah.
Tyler Talbot, thank you so much for the super chat. He's saying re-sign Soto, re-sign Tim Hill, sign Snell, sign Scott, trade for Devin Williams, Nestor for Josh Naylor. Ooh. So Naylor's got 1 more year left before he's a free agent. And he's matured. I give him that. Right? He's grown up. He's got a pretty good offensive profile. I think it would probably cost more than Nestor to get Josh Naylor. I don't know if you agree with me, Ryan, but it might cost more than Nestor to get Josh Naylor.
It depends on the elbow. If his elbow is fine, I think it's a fair 1-for-1, only because Nestor makes $5 million less in arbitration than Naylor. So for the Guardians, you free up $5 million. That probably allows you to bring back someone like Shane Bieber, who is going to be ready for opening day, and then bring in Nestor. That's importing 2 starting pitchers to your roster, and you already have Kyle Manzardo rating on the bench. I don't know. If I'm the Yankees, I would say, if you're not doing Nestor for Naylor, you better not be asking for anything crazy outside of that, because we're doing you a favor. You know what I mean? I do like Naylor's bat too. I also I like some of the energy. I do like, there's a little bit of flair to his game. I know that it's, as you mentioned, there's a difference between, I think, passion and maturity. You want to have a guy who's got maturity to his game. But I mean, his swing will play well in the Bronx too. I mean, he's got the kind of swing that, right field, he could crush the ball over right field.
Yeah, Carl Santana.
Good bats and ball skills too.
Yes, they do. By the way, again, we have over 200 people in here. Keep hitting those likes. Let's see if we can get to 200 likes. We can. It's greatly appreciated. I think we have 90 right now. See, everybody's hit that thumbs up really quickly. It's greatly appreciated. Just shows that you're enjoying the discussion. And thank you again, Tyler Talbot. I appreciate that. So you might need to add, I think if you're going to trade, the only way you can trade Marcus Stroman is if you attach a prospect to him and maybe eat some of the money. Right? I know people are saying get rid of DJ. DJ is a 10-5 player. He also has the no trade clause. He can veto any trade. So you would have to get him to, 1, sign off on it, and 2, you'd have to attach prospects to him and eat some of the money. So I don't know. That one's going to be harder than moving Marcus Stroman, who does not have 10-5 or no trade protection. So,
yeah. And also, Stroman, look, for all of his faults, like, I don't think he's a great starting pitcher anymore. I think he's clearly shown he's regressed. His velocity's down. A team knows that if he's not good, they can cut him and avoid the 140 inning club option for 2026. And the other thing is, I mean, he wasn't hurt last year. He probably would have thrown 180 innings if not for being moved out of the rotation. He might have, I mean, he's a league average starting pitcher, right? There's a team that could say, hey, for $9 million, give us Marcus Stroman. Look at what Kyle Gibson got. Look at what Lance Lynn got last year. Lance Lynn got $9 million guaranteed. Hey, I think it's a team that I think could really profile well for like a guy like Stroman is. I know the San Francisco Giants last year put Taylor Rogers, the left-hander, not the one with the funky arm slot. He's a different pitcher. He put him on waivers, and they were hoping a team would pick him up. Nobody picked him up. Maybe, he makes $11 million this year. Maybe you throw in a little money to take the Rogers contract. You add a left-hander to your bullpen who kind of profiles like Tim Hill, weird sinker from like a weird slot, good slider, can miss some bats. Maybe you import him to your bullpen and you add maybe $5-6 million to your payroll. Sure. But for the Giants, they're getting a starting pitcher who, let's be honest, you're a ground ball guy who's playing in San Francisco. Your life's pretty easy, right? It's a big ballpark, good defenders over in San Francisco. They got Fitzgerald and they got Chapman. He's a great defensive player. I think that trade that could be something. I think the Giants would be a team that could be a good Stroman salary dump candidate. They also I think Stroman mentioned he wanted to play for San Francisco at some point in his career. So, hey, if you're Stroman too, it's not like I think he'd be against the trade either. He wants to start. The Yankees currently cannot give him a starting rotation spot. It's just something I think that would work out for both sides. I don't think he'd have anything against the Yankees for it.
I don't think so either. Did you hear about the trade proposal that Ken Rosenthal made?
No, I haven't seen it.
He proposed Nestor Cortez to the Los Angeles Angels for catcher Logan O'Hoppe, and then moving Austin Wells to first base.
I don't know if I would personally, if between the two catchers, I'd move O'Hoppe to first base before I move Wells, because Wells, I think, is a far superior defender. And then for the Angels, here's the thing. I was going to say, I don't know if it would make sense for the Angels to do that, but I don't know if the Angels do anything that makes sense, right? They just took on the salary dump for Jorge Soler, who's a DH, when Mike Trout is a center fielder who's always hurt, and you should probably be playing him at DH. Yeah. The Braves were clearly trying to get rid of Soler, and he's in his age 33 season. You owe him $30 million. They're a very interesting organization, for lack of better terms. But yeah, I could see the Angels being a team where hey, we want one of your starters. We'll give you a position player for it. And I think the Yankees and them could have some conversations there. And personally, I think we could steal a player from them. So I'd like to make a trade with the Los Angeles Angels, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. If there's a player that you could steal from them, who do you think it would be?
It's interesting because someone like Taylor Ward's bat, I really like, because he's a very patient hitter with good power. His numbers last year weren't great, but I think, that he underperformed a little bit. I'm not huge on Rengifo after wrist surgery. That scares me. That always, you kind of think of Benintendi and what happened with the White Sox with him. He's never been the same since that wrist surgery, that wrist procedure. Yeah, I think Ward would stand out to me. He's also a 1-year player, so you're not committing a ton of money to him. He's a pretty decent defensive outfielder, so and you can maybe try him at first base. He's had some infield experience. I think Ward, he's right-handed. He can help you with your problem against lefties. So I like Ward a decent bit.
Yeah, and these are some of the under radar trades that the Yankees could make that could make them better around the margins, right? I could see potentially talking about a trade for Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals. I know the Cardinals, I think, are looking to add a pitcher. Maybe Nestor Cortez is an option for the Cardinals for a Helsley or something like that. I had my eyes on Brendan Donovan for a while.
So I was going to mention him. He's a stellar ball player, man.
Yeah, his contact skills. He's a hard-nosed ball player. He's the guy I would like as a Yankee, whether it be playing second or I don't care where he played. If he was here, he'd be a good addition to the Yankees. And if you can get him in a way that is I don't want to block. He's got 3 years left too, Brendan Donovan. Before he's I don't want to block Caleb Durbin. I want to give him every opportunity. But if you get somebody like Brendan Donovan, it makes sense. Jazz.
I'm going to be honest.
Go ahead.
If you have Brendan Donovan, I'll figure out the rest of the stuff after that.
Yeah.
I think Donovan's swing plays well for Yankee Stadium. His versatility is there. And the Yankees actually now have players who I think are very attractive to the Cardinals here. Heel and Schmidt are very attractive players for the Cardinals who are looking to add more swing and miss to the rotation and have years of control and are not expensive players. For the Cardinals, you're looking at your infield, you're looking at your outfield. All right, we have a little bit of a log jam here. Maybe that's a possibility. If the Yankees need to go and get an outfielder, let's say, unfortunately, Soto doesn't come back, Lars Nootbaar is someone that appeals to me because he's got good power, good plate discipline, good bat to ball skills, good athleticism. He's 27 years old. He's a guy who could maybe be a longer term player. And for some reason, every time the Cardinals trade an outfielder, they become a star, like Randy Rosarena, Adolis Garcia. Dylan Carlson went to the Rays and had some success. The one player I'm not particularly interested in importing is Nolan Arenado. I'm not the contracts, the regression, the big pulled fly ball guys, a right-handed hitter, that doesn't play too well at Yankee Stadium compared to other ballparks, and he's very reliant on that for his power. Great defensive player, don't get me wrong. Phenomenal defensive player. Going to be in the Hall of Fame one day, but yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not like a huge idea of like, hey, let's go bring in a guy making money who may not be that good next year.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. If Nootbaar and Donovan was a possibility in a multiplayer trade, what would you be willing to give up for those, especially if Soto doesn't come back?
I mean, anything, like outside of Dominguez, anything. Like, I think those two players would be, I mean, those two players are like good and not saying they're like cornerstones, but they have cornerstone potential. Something I really like about Lars Nootbaar's game that I think not enough people have talked about in his time with the Cardinals. He's had injury issues for sure. And that's a concern, but he has a great play. He struck out 19.5% of the time, walked 12.8% of the time. And he hits the ball really, really hard. It's rare to find those kinds of players. That's a player that profile well at Yankee Stadium. I think Donovan might be a more realistic get because of the Yankees' needs blended with, just really the Yankees' needs, right? Like the Yankees don't desperately need an outfielder the way if they sign Soto, the way they desperately need an infielder. And in Donovan's case, what you can do with him and Chisholm is that you can figure out which one plays better at second and which one plays better at third. Donovan, has had some really good defensive years at third, but he's also had some strong defensive seasons at second. I also think his power could get better here, right? Like he doesn't have to try to hit for more power to hit for more power here, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm like contradicting myself a little bit, but you know what I mean? Like he doesn't have to try to hit for power to hit for power here.
And to your point too, Donovan doesn't block Dominguez in the outfield. So you can still have Dominguez here and give him an opportunity to be your everyday left fielder or center, whatever you decide it would be. So I'm be totally happy with getting Brendan Donovan, just Brendan Donovan alone. If you can get Donovan Helsley, that would be awesome too. But I think the Yankees can supply relievers in a way that's not going to, bludgeon their payroll. So I'm confident about the Yankees. That's one thing in Cashman I trust. I don't worry about they signed a pitcher today. They signed a 31-year left-handed pitcher with 6 years of control. I don't know if you heard, but this is like, it could be like a Luke Weaver type thing. Like Luke Weaver and Tim Hill were considered dumpster dives, but they wound up being two of our best relievers last year. So I don't have any lack of confidence in their ability to fill the bullpen up.
I'm at the point where I really get frustrated when I see people go, why do they pick up this bum? He's got an XERA. How many times do we have to do it, man? I remember when Tim Hill got picked up, it was like they picked up this garbage reliever out of nowhere. Hey, stay the course with Matt Blake. I get it. For every Luke Weaver, there's, a Dennis Santana. For every Tim Hill, there's an Enyel De Los Santos, right? But if you're batting like 500 on those kinds of players, that's really damn good. These were bad baseball players. These are not, you're trying to take a good player, make them great. You're trying to take a terrible, Luke Weaver had the worst ERA in baseball from 2020 to 2023. DFA twice in 1 year, failed starter, 4 or 5 different organizations in 4 years, and now he's your best reliever, right? And he only got better as he had more pressure. The Yankees put him in a closer spot, started throwing harder, performing better. Yankees need him in the postseason. Outside of that one home run, he was special. I mean, that's so for the leadoff point here, that's where a guy like Donovan, 2 birds, 1 stone right there. Brendan Donovan as a leadoff hitter, oh my goodness. Could you imagine him trying to hit in front of Soto and Judge?
Oh, baby.
I mean, come on. This guy, people think that with Donovan too, there's contact hitters who they hit everything into the ground and you're kind of worried about how that's going to play, right? He is a line drive hitter. There's a difference between a contact, just a guy who puts the ball in play, and a good guy, a guy with good bat to ball skills and an excellent feel for driving the ball through the zone. I'm going to try to pull this up here because they have on Baseball Savant a metric where it'll tell you how many home runs a player would have hit at a different ballpark if they played there. Donovan would have had 19 home runs compared to 14 if he played all of his games at Yankee Stadium.
Jesus, you see.
Could you imagine, 19 home runs, guy who had a 340 OBP? That OBP probably bumps up with more home runs, some of his outs turning into homers. Good Lord. You know what I mean? He was in the 80th percentile in chase rate and a 95th percentile in whiff rate, 98th percentile in terms of squaring the ball up. Donovan, Soto, Judge. I mean,
and this is where you can upgrade at second base over Gleyber Torres. I like Torres, but this is an upgrade over Gleyber Torres, okay? Just like I expect Jason Dominguez to replace Alex Verdugo's production in left field. That's reasonable production to expect from him. But Donovan over Torres, to me, is an upgrade. I wish Torres well, but if we can get Donovan, sign me up for it all day. And I would keep Jazz at third. Jazz can pick it just like Nolan Arenado can pick it. And plus, he has a cannon for an arm, third base. So you get more experience there. I think he'd be fine. But if Brendan Donovan's at third, Jazz, I don't care which one. You alternate him for all I care. But you get Donovan here, that changes the lineup in the top half of this lineup.
To me, with the rotation, you just figure it out from there, right? I know that it'd be a question mark of, all right, well, who do you sign to replace, a Schmidt or a Heel in the rotation? You figure that out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the free agent class is loaded with good pitching. Even if it's taking a flyer on a Walker Buehler, that's fine with me. The guy who I really wish to take a flyer on that, unfortunately, has a qualifying offer into him attached now, and I'm no longer interested. Nick Pivetta, to me, like, you always felt like a guy who was like, all right, just get him out of Boston. He'll be fine. Even then, he was like, a slightly better than average run preventer. That's fine with me. A slightly better than average ERA, and you make 30 starts. Yeah, that's probably better than what you got from Schmidt, considering he made like 12, 13 starts. You know what I mean? You need volume sometimes. You could trade for someone as well. Even if it's like a one-year deal for like a Charlie Morton, I don't care. If you were to get Brandon Donovan, man, I'll take the hit to the rotation. I take or Nathan Eovaldi for a 2-year deal. Like, if you replace Schmidt with Eovaldi, are you really like downgrading? Maybe you give like a try contract to a Shane Bieber who just came off of Tommy John. Like, realistically, how many? And this is another thing too with like Heel and Schmidt. And I love those two, and I think they can be really strong stars in this league. How many healthy years do they have left? Like, How confident are you that they make 30 starts next year?
Exactly.
I'm not that confident either of them does it. I'm not saying that, they're not good, but, Brendan Donovan's a better bet to give you, let's say, X amount of value over Clark Schmidt and Luis Heel are. So I think that should be a factor in this as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that, like, there are a lot of starters that can secure a 2 or 3 year deal max in this market right now. With the exception of Snell and Burns, I can't see anybody other than those two getting more than 5 years. Even Jack Flaherty, I can see him topping out at 3, just because of his health track record. Sean Manaea can see him, but he's attached to a QL, Sean Manaea, right? So Flaherty's not, but he comes with, the Yankees passed on him at the deadline because of red flags in his medicals, whatever that may be. So, but the Yankees can replace Schmidt, they can replace Hill. And congratulations to Hill for winning Rookie of the Year. That's great. But they are replaceable. And I worry about Hill too, but coming back from Tommy John, and Nestor Cortez had this issue a couple of years ago where he never topped out at 90 innings, and then he went up to 180. And then the year after that, he had shoulder problems all year.
And Alek Manoah. I mean, look at Clark Schmidt this year. He made 30 starts in 2023, shoulder barks in 2024. Alek Manoah was 30-something starts, nearly 200 innings, never was the same after. Injuries for pitchers, they're a lot more fickle and unpredictable too. I mean, going into 2024, the two guys who I'd consider the best bets for innings were Cole and Schmidt because they had made 30 starts a year prior. Cortez, Rodon, Heel, Stroman were all massive question marks. Outside of Heel, none of those 4 question marks touched the IL. Well, Cortez did towards the end of the year, but he came back for the postseason. Mm-hmm. Cole hit the IL early. The 2 guys who missed the most time were your 2 guys who pitched the most for the year prior. Injury issues are very, very fickle. They're very, touch and go. A guy can go from injury prone. I mean, look at Zach Wheeler, injury prone every single year. And then boom, he's one of the most durable, top flight, superstar. You know what I mean? Shane Bieber, guy was a workhorse. Tommy John surgery. Corbin Burns, his whole thing was he can't pitch deep into games. He's not throwing enough innings. 200, 190, 200 innings every single year. That guy churns innings. Severino, his whole thing couldn't be healthy for years. Makes 30 starts for the Mets that last year and gets to the postseason. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? It's so volatile. People are so caught up in trying to predict how many innings you can get out of a guy. To do that, you just got to put together the most talented rotation you can and kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best.
Yeah, and this is where I think the
So,
magic of long relief comes into play.
yeah.
Because it serves as a bridge. It protects the starters and it protects the short relievers, right? And if a starter all of a sudden gets bombed and throws 2 innings, you bring in a long reliever who can throw 4 or 5, then you're not utilizing 6 relievers, especially in a day where you have a doubleheader the next day or something like that. It's to me, I think 2 good long relievers for the Yankees would be a good idea as a good protection for both sides of the pitching stable.
I
So,
like Clayton Beeter in their farm system for that kind of purpose because he's built up as a starter. Can miss a lot of bats too. I know his command's a little bit of a concern, but a guy who can miss bats, maybe you kind of figure out. I think that long relief role gives him a nice bridge to figure out what he's going to be. If he excels in that role, hey, maybe he can start. If he, seems to struggle as the outing goes on, all right, maybe he's more of a 1 to 2 inning guy. But this is where you can figure out whether a pitcher is going to be a starter or a reliever. The Brewers have deployed this tactic with their pitchers before. We saw this with Schmidt, right? Like Schmidt was a multi-inning reliever, and the Yankees figured out, okay, we think we can start him. Let's get him on that path. But yeah, Schmidt for Donovan, I would do that. Like I love Clark Schmidt. That's my boy. I've been a big Clark Schmidt guy for years. I'd do that today.
Sign me up for that too, Talbot. If we had an opportunity to do that, you sign me up for that. Because Schmidt
Absolutely
he can be replaced. So, yeah, that to me, this is. I think the thinking cap's good. Like it's making my head spin because there's so many different directions that the Yankees can go, right? And a lot of it revolves around Soto. But at the end of the day, there's so many other holes that need to be addressing. So I appreciate you coming on because it gives us a lot of different insight in terms of areas that we might not be thinking, right? And I enjoy different perspectives. I think it's very valuable. And then I'd love to have you on again so we could talk about this as we get closer to maybe the winter meetings, right? I have somebody who's going to be reporting live from the winter meetings. He's going to feed me in on everything every day in winter meetings that I can report. So, so I'll be reporting stuff on a regular basis. So you're welcome if you're available. You can come on live with me in the winter meetings if you like. I'll be live every single day during the winter meetings. So, and that'll be a good time to get people on, get people educated up and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more stuff before that. So, I'm sure we'll find out when Sasaki gets posted, if Murakami gets posted, and whatever else happens. I don't remember the deadline for players to accept qualifying offers. I think it's the middle of November 15th, November 16th, or something like that.
It's coming up soon. Yeah, I think it's like a 2-week window after they're offered. I think, it'll be interesting to see, especially because like some starting pitchers, they wrecked the starting pitcher market because Severino and Pivetta both got them. And I'll be honest, man, I think that takes them from both like, oh, you should sign them to like, I don't want to touch them. They got the qualifying offer. I'm going to lose 2 draft picks for a 4? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? I'll lose draft picks for a 1. I'll consider draft picks for a 2, not for a 4. Definitely not for a 4.
I was surprised that Pivetta got one. I was surprised. And the pitcher from the Reds, I was
Nick Martinez. It really bummed me that he got one because I was like, long relief role, maybe a starter, that's someone you could bring in. But once he got the QO, I had an article already. Like I was like, all right, Nick Martinez, a little sneaky target here. Had to scrap him. Him and Pivetta were both on that board. Had to scrap both of them from that window because I really didn't think they were going to get the QO. And then he did. I mean, it's so frustrating.
Who's going to give him $21 million for that's a lot of money for these guys.
I will say for Martinez, it's a win for him because he's 34. He's about to get $21 million instead of that player option, which is around 13. Just get a $7 million raise. Good for him, man. Or if he says, you know what, I'll decline it. I mean, I don't think he should because I don't think a team's going to guarantee him more money. But yeah, I mean, it's a good thing for him. I think the guy who really got hurt the most from it was Severino because I thought his market was going to be interesting anyways. Now you're going to get 2 draft picks to get him. I think teams are going to be scared from him. He might take it, honestly.
I think he's going to take it. I think Minaya is going to sign elsewhere. Danny, thank you so much for the super chat. I hope Hal's watching Soto highlights in 24 on his flight. I'm sure he is. I mean, he's going to have, he'll have a game plan. If Hal's going out there, then he's dead serious. So, Yamamoto money that was never used. Yeah, well, this is true too. They allocated him they offered him $300 million. So some of that went to Stroman, obviously, and whoever else they filled, but. Yeah, I mean, expect Soto to get double that at least. So, I think he's going to be close to 700 also. And how could you not? Generational players not going to get discounts. Generational players don't take discounts. So,
Yeah, and I agree too about the Yamamoto money, man. Like, hey, that Yamamoto money was not touched. It was not touched. Let's go out and let's use it and let's go get our guy. And I think Hal knows. I think Hal knows. I'm being honest. Like, I really think Hal knows. He knows. It's like just like with Judge. When everyone got, all the Giants, well, the Yankees. I mean, it's the same things I'm hearing all over again. Look, I have to see it to believe it. I have to see that the Yankees aren't willing to go get their guy before I believe that kind of stuff. If they don't get Soto, they don't get Soto. And then, we can criticize them. But, I see a lot of people are like, why is he waiting to meet after the Mets? Oh, he's meeting only because he's meeting. Like, come on. There's not like, why did they let him even hit free agency? He was 100% going to hit free agency. The timing of the meetings, I almost prefer meeting. If they met with the Mets after they met with the Yankees, I'd be scared, man. I'd be like, oh no, because you're not guaranteed that meeting. Hal Steinbrenner is guaranteed a meeting with Juan Soto. That means Steve Cohen can't walk in there and sign Juan Soto. That's a guarantee. So, I think that's an important. It's important. It's important how the timing of the meetings go. Yes, but at the end of the day, wait to criticize until after it's done. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and believe me, we'll celebrate when it does happen. If it happens, and we'll celebrate it. We'll definitely celebrate it. So. But the fact is, like, the Yankees need more than just Juan Soto back here. They have other holes that they need to fill, and they have a lot of money coming off. They have a lot of guys who aren't going to be back. So, and I still think 3 or 4 guys. I think they're going to shop Grisham. I think they're going to shop Cortez and maybe Stroman, right? Cortez and Grisham are non-tender candidates because they're still in arbitration. As is Tim Meza, as is Jose Trevino. So I wouldn't be surprised if a couple guys are non-tendered, freeing up some money to either sign Juan Soto or add to Juan Soto. So this is the strategic part of the offseason I think is going to happen, right? And it has to happen for the Yankees. And again, they want to upgrade as much as they possibly can. If you look at the Dodgers roster, they were deep everywhere. The Yankees need to improve their back-end depth in certain areas. So,
and also on top of that, man, like, you're talking about a lot of, like, I think players on last year's team who don't have to be on this year's team. You know what I mean? A lot of the guys who are more detriments than helps, you're going to get them off the roster. It's important to, I think last year the supplemental talent got better as the season went on. Even the addition of Jazz, I feel like it kind of just, and Wells breaking out, those 2 players alone changed the feel of the lineup, right? You maybe import a second baseman who's a little more productive or a little more consistent in Torres. They really don't have to hit a ton. Remember, you got to look at Torres' numbers from last year, not what he does next year, from last year in its totality. And then you factor in the defense and the base running. Someone like Hassan Kim will outperform 2024 Gleyber Torres' value. He just will, right? Like, I love Gleyber, loved him as a Yankee. There were boneheaded mistakes for sure, right? There were things that were bad, but I think at the end of the day, he was a net positive. Maybe he wasn't the player we hoped he'd be. But, he's a good player.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, hey, defense matters. Base running matters. How many, I think of this one game in San Diego where Gleyber makes an error and it leads to a big inning. Hassan Kim makes that play. Yankees win that game, right? Little things like that. You win games off that. What if they had Jazz for the first half of the year last year? How many games do you think they would, especially with the way he was running the base and how he was able to hit once he came over to Yankee Stadium? They might have ran away with that division. I mean, they were running away with the division towards the end.
Yep.
Those little things, just those small, tiny details, they're really important. So, I want to make sure that the Yankees are able to kind of just marginally better supplement on the supplementary talent, just a little bit better.
And gang, this is why Ryan and I are mentioning Brendan Donovan, Hassan Kim. These guys are ideal fits for, improving so many components of this Yankees offense and team, right?
And they're consistently productive. Look at their career numbers. Hassan Kim was bad 1 year. It was his first year here. Brandon Donovan has never had a bad season as a major leaguer. Those are important things, right? You don't need a superstar once you have Soto and Judge. You just need a guy where, all right, he rolls out of bed, 340 OBP, 15 home runs, good defense. Just, you're going to get that year in, year out. You don't have to think about it, right? Yeah. That's the kind of player that, outside of Judge and Soto, they didn't have enough of those last year, and it showed in the World Series. Dodgers had a ton of those. You can roll out of bed, Max Muncy, 100 OPS, 30 bombs, right? Roll out of bed, Teoscar Hernandez, 30 bombs, right? Roll out of bed, even someone like Gavin Lux, solid bat, play good D. Will Smith, wake up and he sleepwalks to 20 home runs as a catcher. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things. You either want your young players to develop into that, or you want to be able to import talent who can do that. And the Yankees didn't have enough of it. The Dodgers did, and it showed up in the World Series. And, the World Series loss, a lot of people, I think, are going to take that as same old Yankees. This team can't do this, and that. horrible. They're going to be so bad, whatever. Last year should only make you more hungry to spend, to be there, to watch this team. Because if they have Juan Soto, if they keep Juan Soto, he was such a difference maker. He's the kind of player they haven't had. Like just a guy who, like, postseason, you can't pitch to him. Try pitching to him. You saw how that went. Never went well for anybody. Doesn't matter who's on the mound, what they've got. 99 miles an hour over the center field fence. He's got a big curveball over the fence. He's got a great sliders over the fence. He's got a changeup that's down the line for a double. That kind of player where he's just a game wrecker. You put the right guys around him and Judge, they're gonna win, man. They're going to win a World Series. I promise you that.
And remember, last year's Yankee team was projected to be a 4th or 5th place team in the beginning of the season. They exceeded expectations by a mile. Okay, I didn't expect them to make it to the World Series, but I'm glad that they did. You know, at some point in August, we were like, oh, shit, they're not going to even make the playoffs because they had that dry slump. Then they rebounded. They came back. They won the division. So they came back, and they fought back from quite a bit of adversity. And I like the Yankees team because they are better at coming back from adversity than the 2022 team was and 2023 team was. So that's a testament of a guy like Juan Soto. And if you bring in guys like Donovan Kim, it's only going to add to that monster that makes it better and harder for them to come into these dips. Harder for
and look at the team numbers offensively. They led the league in home runs, and they had a seriously cut down strikeout rate. They still walked a ton, still hit the ball hard. In James Rousing's first year with the Yankees, I don't feel like I could walk away with anything other than they had a good year at the plate. They did a lot of good things offensively. There are a couple of guys who let me down. Volpe, I thought was going to be a little better, whatever. But, Wells took a leap. Jazz came over here and immediately clicked. He found his swing here. You know what I mean? I was very impressed with Rousing. I've always been impressed with Matt Blake. I feel like the Yankees, the thing they lacked was the offensive development that they got from the pitching staff, where they could maximize guys. Hey, and look at the number Soto put up here, right? You mean to tell me that? I mean, why weren't other teams getting that out of him? You think it's just a free agent year? I think it was also just like, hey, maybe it's a better mentality. Maybe Rousing's able to click with him more. Maybe that clubhouse is a little more connected. Maybe they just maybe they just embrace the messages the Yankees have as an organization a lot more, where it's, all right, we're going to try to hit the ball hard. We're going to try to do damage on contact. And we're going to also see a lot of pitches. Those two things, when you have great plate discipline and great power, you combine those two things and you add the element of they didn't strike out a lot. Hard to figure out like what's the flaw in that kind of offense. Really, the flaw was just a little bit of depth. That's it, right? But as a team, holistically, their approach, I feel like it improved from previous Yankee teams.
They led the majors in homers. They led the majors in walks. That's a testament to power and plate discipline at the same time. That's not an easy combination. So that's something the Yankees have not had in a while. The Yankees have been known for being impatient and swinging at bad pitches, and they did a little bit of that in the playoffs. I get it. The bats picked the worst time to get cold in a World Series. I get it, but the Yankees were miles ahead of where they were in 2023. So as a team, especially offensively. So
absolutely.
And this is the first time that they had a roster this good. And what happened? They went to the freaking World Series. So
they ran out $300 million payroll and went to the World Series. How? That's your MO right there, right? You ran a $300 million payroll for the first time and you went to the World Series. Bet those $250 million payroll teams, not close to as good as this year's team. Those $280 million, nope. Those, spread the money around. Nope. I mean, we saw that spread the money around offseason 2014 when they didn't get Cano. How'd that work out? Beltran wasn't a great contract. McCann wasn't a stellar contract. Ellsbury, right? Oh, right. Like any one of these guys can be a Jacoby Ellsbury. Willie Adames can be an Ellsbury, right? Santander can be an Ellsbury. You're not an Ellsbury until you're an Ellsbury. You know what I mean? You're not a bad contract until you have that fall off. If everyone thought these players were going to have a fall off, they wouldn't have gotten that money. But the one guy you can guarantee is going to be that guy and not be an Ellsbury is Juan Soto. That's what you can guarantee. The best contracts in the Yankees, Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge. And those are the highest paid players because they're superstars. You know what you're getting every single year from them.
Yep.
That's the best. Those are the best. The Harper contract, right? That's one of the best in baseball because he's that dude, right? Look at these star super Shohei Ohtani, $70 million. Who cares? One of the best contracts in baseball. Anyone who makes him a ton of money and he plays and he's awesome. So yeah.
Yeah. Danny, thanks so much for super chat. NL is stacked. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the Padres, the Dodgers, the Atlanta Braves. I think the Atlanta Braves are going to be sneaky this offseason. They're my pick for Adames. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if they added him. They could use a big bat like that. And if you want to get past the Phillies and the Mets, you're going to have to do something like that. The Phillies, I could see them being aggressive. if they trade, they're shopping Castellanos. If they move Castellanos, I could see them going after somebody like Santander too.
Yeah, they're shopping him, Marsh, and Bohm. And like, it's weird because I personally don't think Alec Bohm's like the player that a lot of Philly fans think he is. I guess they don't really like him now, but he can play third and first, and his numbers last year weren't all too bad. So if they're like trading him because they just don't want him around anymore, you could probably get, pretty good value on a player like that. We've seen teams just go, all right, I don't want this guy anymore. Just dump him somewhere. And then you're like, wow, you didn't get enough value for that player. Marsh is a good defensive outfielder who's left-handed and has some power. Maybe that's a lane the Yankees can look at. But I feel like, again, that's only a lane you look at if you lose Soto. And I don't really love the idea of losing Soto. So I don't know, man. I don't know, man. I don't know about you, but like, I don't even want to like put my brain in that mentality.
I don't. No, I mean, I'll probably sleep 5. I mean, I'll probably cry 5 days straight if we lose Juan Soto. So I'll just be a sad man for a little while, man. But we need Juan Soto more than we need anybody else. And if we want to be where we're at, we have to bring him back. We have to bring him back. He's that third part of that tripod: Cole, Judge, Soto. Okay, and if you want to add Stanton in the middle, you can add Stanton. It turns into a square, right? Stanton's another postseason monster. So, and that he's got to be part of this puzzle. He has to be part of this puzzle, Soto. And I don't think it would be the same if he was with the Mets. I don't think it'd be the same if he was anywhere else. I think it feels too right here to have him anywhere else with the Yankees. And the roll call, they love him. He's, and again, our return on investment on Soto would be just as good for the Yankees as the ROI for Ohtani would be for the Dodgers. So, and that's something too. They're not going to get value from any other player the way they would with Soto as an investment. So that's money well spent, and we know this. So no matter what the freaking price is. So that's we'll leave it at that, gang. And I want to thank everybody for coming on. I mean, smash the like buttons, please. We got 200 people in here, and if you're not subscribed to Fireside Yankees, please do that. Okay, it's a reason why I like to have Ryan on. Again, it elevates the conversation, elevates the content, and it's really important. We talk about this a lot, right? I want people to understand the facts, the full story. And if we're going to be pissed off at stuff, I'd rather be pissed off at the facts than the talking points, right? And to me, that's more important. So, and Ryan, I thank you for coming on too. It's always a pleasure having you on, man. And please come on again. So, thank you for everybody that was in the chat. Really appreciate all of yous. Have a great night, everybody. Let's freaking go Yankees. And again, keep your notifications turned on if you're subscribed to both of us, because when news comes out, you'll be at the front of the line when it does. Okay, so we appreciate you. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you next time. Dude, that was killer, man.